welcome to McBean's. This is our third or even fourth video of the season. We started off in November with potting Oncidiums, then we followed up with a sort of just to show our breeding plants, then we did a little one after that just to show how we name plants and things like that. Now we're into our spring, so this is now March the 7th or whatever it is. Depends where you are in the world obviously, but this is our potting time. We are literally just off the Greenwich Meridian, it's just over the hill over there, and we're about 50.1 north or something. So we're right in the south of England, which is the bottom bit of Britain, literally 5 miles from the coast. So this is our spring now, March, April, May really. So this is when we're going to do most of our potting. In fact, we'll pot everything about now, including the things like the Phalaenopsis, which we'll do in a minute. But the main one we'll do at the moment is the Cymbidium. These have just about finished, or you still see there's a few more to come, but it's getting to the end of our season now, so the earliest we'll pot. We pot in a mixture of bark, and there is some peat in there, and some perlite. There's also different types of limes, and there is a very light basic feed in there. Now I know a lot of people don't like using the peat now for ethical reasons or whatever, but I've not found anything that will last as long and as good and controllable as the peat. We tried Koya, that dumped loads of nutrients in the plant, loads of salts. So we use it still, but a lot less than we did. We used to be just neat peat with perlite with no bark, so we're increasing the bark all the time. So this is our Cymbidium. And you can see this has divided itself in effect, and it's actually cut through there. Now I don't have to divide this plant, it could stay there quite happily for another 2 or 3 years and grow quite nicely, but being a commercial grower I want to cut it in half and sell one half basically, make a bit of money out of it. So all we're going to do is literally sever down through these pseudo bulbs. They're all still alive, I know they look dead but they're still alive, and we're literally just going to divide the plant in two. So it's a bit messy this, but we'll give it a go. There we go, a nice big established Cymbidium. And all we do is get a knife, a clean knife. We sterilise the knives between plants. The easiest way to do it is just to flame it off with a little gas gun. You can get chemicals to do it, and if you're desperate, just use full fat milk will do it. Just put the blade in full fat milk. It's just in case there's any viruses. You should be right nowadays. Most plants now are virus tested before they're put in production. So, having said that, I've seen a few Phalaenopsis that have got virus. So we're not going to be very fancy about this. Literally, I'm just going to cut straight through, because I'm going to discard those bulbs. So just like cutting up a cake basically. It's good fun this. If you've had a bad day, it's very therapeutic to slice a plant in two. So that's what we're after. So it doesn't really matter what you're cutting up here, because we're going to discard those bits anyway. There we go. So that's what we're ending up with. Two separate plants. Now these old bulbs, as you can see, are still full of food. They're as a food supply basically. If you cut all the roots off your plant, it will live from these back bulbs, okay? If you get a disproportionate amount of back bulbs to green bulbs though, it's telling you the plant is in need of potting. If you divide a plant, never go below a minimum of 4 bulbs. So preferably 4 green bulbs. So in this case I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 green bulbs and a couple of grows. So it's well big enough to flower next year. If you cut down to 1 bulb, you're going to have to wait 4 or 5 years till it's big enough to flower, okay? So the bigger the better within reason. So now our problem is, of course, we cut the plant in half, but some of the root from that half is in this bit and vice versa, it's gone around the pot. So what I do now is make a crescent cut, literally right, cutting all the root from under these old bulbs. The bulbs are no longer active, they're not working at all, they've done their bit. I say they're there purely as a food reserve. So I just make this sort of crescent cut to get rid of all that old, there we go. And you've got to be thorough about this, there's no point pouncing about. It's like a bad apple in a barrel, if you know what I mean. It will rock the other ones off. So you only want to be left with a root that is associate to the front end of the plant. So this is the living bit. Yeah, this is all the new plant, new growths coming. So all you want to be left with is the roots that belong to those. The rest of the plant's history, it's done its thing sort of 7, 8, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. So again, but be thorough about it. You don't leave any rubbish in there at all. And it's much better to cut too much root off than not enough, basically. There we go. So getting right back to a nice, simple system there. I know it looks a bit drastic, but they will quickly re-root. What you're doing is root pruning in effect. Nature tries to balance the top and the bottom, so it will encourage it to root. If we wanted to, we could cut this plant again, but then one bit wouldn't be big enough for flowering. That probably would miss a year. So I'm going to leave it at this size. Go into a fairly small pot, and I know it looks ridiculously small. In fact, I'll probably have to go one up from that if I've got one up from that. I think that's going to be too big. Yeah, you see, that's too big. I'd have far too big a volume for the plant to go in. So what I'm going to do is just nick a bulb off. So I'm actually making the plant fit the pot, which sounds a bit ridiculous. But you pot to what the root dictates, basically. If you haven't got much root, then you put it into a little pot. It will root much quicker by going in this little pot like this than it would if you were to put it into a big one. In fact, if it's good enough, your growing's good enough, you may even be able to repot it in the late summer. Now I know that looks absolutely stupid, vastly underpotted, but they're much, much happier. Yeah. I will have roots on that within probably 3 or 4 weeks, to be honest. So there we go. That's all we're after. Again, don't press it in too much. You just want to, just so it sits on the top there. So I know it looks ridiculously underpotted, but they are much, much happier that way. I'll quickly just do the other bit. Just to so same thing again. I've got these 4 bulbs there. I don't need that one there. In fact, I don't need that one there either. But it's still big enough. Cut down underneath. And do this sort of crescent cut just to get rid of all that old history. That's what we're after, really. We don't want the old stuff anymore because it's done its bit. You know, it's years ago. So same again. I'm left with just the root belonging to the front end of the plant. The plants migrate. Each year they put up a new bulb. They're looking for new soil in effect. So they'll only migrate, albeit, an inch a year, but they actually do migrate. Same again. I'm going to go into a stupidly small pot. I haven't got much in the way of root. These will annoy you and keep falling over, but it's much better to be that way than not rooting. Right, so there you go. So they will now be, both of these plants, both big enough to flower. Back up there so you can see what we've ended up with. We'll end up with 1 and 2. Okay. Now these will be watered in with just rainwater. Yeah, we won't ever use anything but rainwater on the nursery, and we won't use any feed on these for 2 months. The idea is that you'll start the plant into re-rooting, basically. It gets hungry, it wants to see, it's looking for water, it's looking for food. After a couple of months, then the roots will be established, then you can add your feed, and it must be an orchid feed. Don't use anything else. We'll only ever use here is rainwater with added orchid feed. Okay. So that's a straight division. I'll just put these out of the way somewhere. If you want to, and if you're desperate enough, you can grow these little black bulbs on. These little fellas, they're still alive, as I've mentioned. You can either just leave them as they are in a little pot, and then you'll get a new growth will come from the side and go up here. Or if you want to, you can pot them into a tiddly little pot. I think I've got any here. And then you can sort of forget about them, but that will just literally pot into there. And you'll get a new growth from the side, but you won't see it flower for another 5 years. So that's an option. So you haven't even got the excitement of seeing something new. Right, that's one lot of potting. Obviously your pot looks nice, your plant looks nice, and it's growing well, and you're just dropping on, and you don't need to do any of this. It's only when they've got to a point of a mature plant. Right, this one is slightly different in the fact that it's lost all the old plant. The original bulb was here, if you like, so it's just gone that way. But now, as you can see, I've got a disproportionate amount of these back bulbs to green bulbs. So here I'm just going to rebalance it, just to get us back into a sort of an easier system. So see, they're all lovely rooting. Right, so same thing again. I'm just going to take the back off. By looking at it, we've actually got two separate plants here. I think I've got one plant there, and one to the left and one to the right of me, if that makes sense. So let me just cut through. All the bulbs are joined up by a small rhizome. So you just have to sever through the rhizome. There we go. And again, I don't want all these back bulbs because it's disproportionate, so I'm actually going to cut this down to a 2-bulb division. There. And again, I'll do that little crescent cut under the back there. Right, so that's giving me division number 1. In fact, there's new growths coming there already, can you see?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. So
that's one division. We'll do the same on the other one. It gives a noise there, it's just the ventilators going up there. We'll cut through this one. Same again, a little crescent cut. Obviously tidy the plants up a bit as well to take some of the old bracts off these things. Right, so this one is obviously 2 bulbs, i.e. 1 bulb, 2 bulbs and a growth. So we're going to have to wait 2 years to see that one flower. Okay. And the other one was about the same, isn't it? Yeah, we're basically 2 bulbs and the new growth. So I wouldn't expect to see either of these flower for at least 2 and possibly 3 years. Okay. Once they've made a mature plant, of course, you can leave them alone for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, they'll be quite happy, to be honest. And I'm going to drop these on again into small pots. And these will annoy you because they keep falling over, so you have to prop them up. Same thing applied. We'll water in with rainwater, but no feed for a couple of months. So there's division 1. Same with division 2. Slightly bigger pot. You see, I don't compress this stuff down at all. We'll let it settle when you water it in. Just gentle like that. Oops, that's the right label in the right plant. So there we go. So we've got 2 plants there that will flower in 2 years' time, and then we've also got this batch of back bulbs we can use at a later date. We can rather just pot up and they'll flower, say, another 5 years' time. So it's quite a time. Right, what we'll do now, we'll go next door and we'll just have a look at a couple of Phalaenopsis, and then we'll see some other bits and pieces. But that's Cymbids in a nutshell, to be honest. Yep. Right, follow me, Leon.
This is Jeremy.
Right, these are Phalaenopsis. Now, the thing we've just been doing Cymbidiums, they are sympodial. Yeah, they grow outward. These things, the Phalaenopsis, the moth orchids, whatever you call them, are monopodal, i.e. they don't go outwards, they just go upwards, basically. They get a bit old, a bit tired. You can see that's growing nicely, lovely root system. The whole point of these transparent pots is so that it retains the aerial roots within the pot. These make a lot of aerial roots, as this one has done. Now, these are a tactus root. They actually breathe in and out, just like a leaf does in effect. But more important, they follow the light around the host tree, in effect, so it cuddles itself to a tree using these. Now, these transparent pots are there really to try and retain these within the pot, these roots. However, you can get this after a while, which is not so clever. You can get algae, moss, and God knows what else growing in there, because obviously you've got light in there, you've got high humidity, absolute perfect growing conditions. So every now and then you're going to have to repot these, purely on the fact that the compost itself is deteriorated. Same thing again, we just take all the old stuff away. And often or not, you'll find these have got a small peat pot in the middle. If I can show you. Yeah, there we go. It's actually a peat pot that's got glue on it. It's actually glued peat. Now, this is how they start them off, usually in the Far East. You can usually just pull that apart because it's decayed so much and the pot comes away with it. Now obviously you can't pot that as it is, it's an absolute mess. So now we're back into that root pruning again. So I usually take the bottom set of leaves off, pull straight down, don't do it at an angle because you can cause trouble. Okay, so just 2 off like that. And now you've got to get rid of any dead root, because just with the Cymbidium, a dead root next to a live root will actually cause the live one to die, in effect. And I usually start by taking the oldest roots off. These are these sort of orangey ones in the centre. Yeah, I do it purely because they're the oldest, in effect. So again, just cut all that off, and then just work your way. You want to end up with a nice simple claw of root. And take off any dead root, i.e. root that's gone all emaciated or whatever. There we go. So that's still too much. I couldn't get in there, so I'm going to actually reduce some of the aerial roots. If you get a lot of aerial roots, it can be indicative that the roots within the pot are not doing very well. So the plant is trying to survive as an air plant. So again, be quite ruthless about it. Don't leave any dead root at all. You can easily take 90% of the root off and it will live quite happily. Now we would normally pot these and leave the air roots on the outside of the pot, because we've already mentioned that's where they want to be. However, it can be useful when you pot these to establish the root. I usually put some of the air roots into the pot itself. Okay. It actually anchors the plant. To be honest, more often than not, they'll just come out of the pot. They just come out of the holes in the bottom. But it's given the plant the time to establish. Yeah, it's let it sort of establish itself by using the aerial roots to fix it in there before the new roots come. So we want our plant to just sit on the top of the compost, okay, and then we literally just infill. Now with these Phalaenopsis, all we use now is bark. This is just pure bark, nothing else but, which is basically what they grow in nature. They just sit on the bark of a tree, obviously. So you don't want it too deep. You want the plant just to be sitting like that on the top there. And we want big air spaces in the pot. Yeah, that's the whole point of this bark. You've got about 50, well, a bit less, probably 40% air space within the pot, because the roots have to breathe in and out. Okay, so if you go and cram it down, or you use something finer than the bark, they will literally suffocate. This would be 25 foot up a tree, sitting on bark, so it would never ever sit wet. So as soon as you stop watering this, you've got those air spaces. That's what we're after. I can quickly just do another one, just to, let's find one that's a bit of a worse state. Okay, this is a bit of an extreme. See, this has really suffered in the walls. It's just lots of root. Again, it's got that central plug in there. Just take that off. You can get to the point they're not worth doing, but if it's of a sentimental value of something like that, then fair enough. But they are really they're grown as a disposable plant, to be perfectly honest. But I think if you can keep it yourself and grow it yourself, you get a much nicer feel from it, don't you? You've done it, you put your own effort into it, if you know what I mean. Right, so there again, I've taken all that root back down, so just end up with this very, very simple claw of root. Always clean the pots if you go back in the same pot, or preferably use a new pot. They're not expensive. So same again, I'll just literally sit it there, gently infill with our bark. The bark is cross-cut. This is actually pine, this is Scotch pine, so it must be a hard bark. You mustn't use that sort of soapy bark they use for sort of mulching. It's got to be really strong, hard bark, which will last for years. Literally about 3 or 4 years it should last before it's no good. Same again, just like the Cymbidium, water it in with rainwater, no feed for a couple of months, okay? And it's important with things in bark, you never let them sit in water. Bark is not a compost. Bark is the edge of a tree, and there's lots of chemicals in there. We make tannin from bark, yeah? So if you stick your plant in water, like it sits in water, it will leach the tannin, actually. It seeps out of the bark, and tannin is poisonous, deadly poisonous. You get lots of trees that don't have ivy growing up. It's because of the bark has got all these chemicals in. So certainly we keep it in that, but make sure it's got free drainage all the time. It must never ever sit seeping. That's an absolute killer. As I said before, make sure you just get the watering right. Just keep them just slightly moist. After a couple of months, you put the feed in there. Same thing again, just keep it slightly moist. And they'll root and flower within usually a few months of potting, to be perfectly honest. But we try and do it in this sort of March, April, May time, even if it means cutting the flower spikes off it a bit early. let your flowers come out open, then cut them and use them as a cut flower spot. It's much better to cut the flowers and pots at the right time of year than it is to wait and hang on till your flowers have finished, because Phalaenopsis is gone for ages, you can get sick of the sight of them after a while. But do pot at the right time, because your plant will benefit from that dramatically. Okay. I think we're about there, aren't we, Ellie?
Yeah, I think so.
Is there anything else all that do us?
I think that's it.
Okay, well I think that's it. We won't bore you anymore, but that's the end of our our season's work. If anyone's got any questions, just contact Ellie, she can answer them for you. And like last time, somebody had a few queries and we just did a little follow-up one, but basically the Cymbidiums are dead easy. We pot them now. They go in the garden from, again in our climate, which I said we're the bottom end of Britain, we put them in the garden from mid-May through till probably November time. We miss the frost basically. If you're growing a much colder place, then you're going to have to leave them in all the time. If it's warmer, you may get about leaving them all year. Obviously bits of Australia, New Zealand or wherever they're in the garden or whatever. Yeah. But for us, they stay indoors right through till May, and then they're outdoors to initiate the flower spike, and then they come in before the frost in the autumn time. Even when they're outside though, we don't forget about them. We chuck a bit of orchid feed with the water, rainwater on them. But it's only the Cymbidium that goes outside. Everything else we grow we keep inside, because obviously we control the humidity and the light levels better. But the Cymbids need it. They need that difference in day and night temperature for flowering. Okay, so now's the time to do those, but don't forget about them. If it's a very wet summer, maybe put a plastic bag around the top of the pot, stop them drowning. Stand them on a brick, stop the wood lice getting in there, and be nice to them. Right, that's it. Well, I'll shut up now, but if there's any questions, get hold of Ellie. Thanks,
Jim.